Hey there, cozy souls and curious minds. Welcome to Stories, Stitches, and Stuff, where the thread never tangles and the stories never end. Today, I'm crocheting a blanket that I'm making in honor of my late mother-in-law, Sandy, that is made with far more love than skill. While I read you Christmas in the Tent, a Harry and Hermione fan fiction. It could be read alone as a one-shot or as a follow-up to The Magic of Music in my previous video. So grab your yarn, your tea, or whatever brings you comfort, and let's stitch together some magic. Disclaimer: Harry Potter characters are not mine, nor is the song Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. Enjoy. Christmas in the Tent by E.E. Binks. "Oh, the weather outside is frightful," said Hermione, coming through the tent flaps and bringing with her an icy blast of air and a flurry of snowflakes. Harry looked up and took in the snow in her hair and on her shoulders, the slush clinging to her wool jacket and jeans, on down to the icy layer coating her bootlaces. Giving her a look of empathy, he held out his hand to invite her to sit by the enchanted bluebell flames in the middle of the floor. It was toasty enough inside the tent that there was already a puddle forming at her booted feet as the warmth overtook her. "But the fire is so delightful," she sighed, having stripped out of her cold and wet outer wear, and was now sitting with her hands held to the flames next to Harry. "And since we've no place to go," he smiled sadly at her, "let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." They had sat before the fire, with shoulders barely touching, in silence for long minutes while listening to the howling wind beat against their canvas home before Hermione brought out Beetle's book and began reading The Three Brothers out loud under the hanging lantern. Harry sat staring at the fire, lost in thought, absent-mindedly twirling his wand. When a particularly violent gust of wind and snow caused a heavy branch to come crashing down somewhere outside, which made both of them jump, Hermione closed her book and moved to sit closer to Harry. He put his arm around her shoulders, and Hermione curled into him as he said, "It doesn't show signs of stopping," before his stomach gave a low growl. Hermione smiled behind her hand until her own stomach seemed to answer Harry's with its own rumble of hunger. Then her eyes widened in excitement, and, grinning broadly, she jumped up to fetch her beaded bag. When she found what she was looking for, she turned and held it up, exclaiming, "I've brought some corn for popping," just as the lantern sputtered and went out. The only light they had to see by now was from the enchanted fire before them. "The lights are turned way down low," said Harry, patting the spot next to him for her to come back and sit with him again. Biting her lip, Hermione hesitated for just a moment before smiling shyly. Then with more confidence, she waved a hand with a shrug as if dismissing the storm and said, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." They popped the corn. Then, trying to lift each other's spirits since Ron had stormed out several weeks ago, they tossed kernels for each other to catch between playing 20 questions. They had been feeling low, too, because they had been jumping around blindly ever since, without having an ultimate destination in mind. They were just determinedly not staying in one spot for too long for safety's sake. As it was getting late, they decided that Harry should sit the next watch while Hermione got a few hours of sleep, but they kept putting it off, wanting to further grow their new relationship by telling stories of each of their childhoods. When Hermione could barely make it through her last story for yawning, Harry sighed and looked at his watch, letting Hermione know it was time for her to rest. He said, "When we finally kiss goodnight, how I'll hate going out in the storm. But if you really hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm." For they both longed so desperately for the war to be over, for their old homes and the innocence they had therein, for a simple life. Harry never dreamed he'd miss the Dursleys, even in the slightest. But then again, looking at Hermione, holding her hand, he admitted it was a minuscule part that longed for the past. Decidedly, he longed for a future with no fears, no burdens of saving the world, and he wanted that future to be with Hermione. If there was one thing the last 6 years had taught him, it was that life was too short to put off important things, or to waste time on insignificant things. And if Hermione had been important to him before, then she had become positively vital to his survival now. Harry soon realized that Hermione had started to doze off in his embrace. Giving himself a mental shake, he had a job to do after all. He adjusted her in his arms. Gently he whispered in her ear, "The fire is slowly dying, and, my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." Hermione smiled as he moved closer. In the kiss that followed, Harry knew, Hermione wanted the same future as he, and that knowing made his heart sing. And that's our thread for today. Whether you came for the stitches, the story, or just a little peace and quiet, I'm so glad you were here. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep creating, keep imagining, and as always, stay cozy, my friends.